Welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com, also Success After Prison Podcast. And I'm really excited because I've got an awesome story today about what a true success after prison is. Those of you who have been following the work know that we really talk through Earning Freedom about how our decisions inside of prison or when we're inside of struggle really can help lead us out to success. And today we've got an individual who's got an extraordinary story. He was once condemned to serve the rest of his life in prison, but instead right now he is really crushing it outside in San Francisco, working with a Silicon Valley company and really just leading. So I want to take this moment of introducing my friend Kenyatta Lial. Kenyatta, welcome so much to the Earning Freedom Podcast. Tell our audience a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what brought you into the criminal justice system.
Good morning, Mike, and thanks for having me. Well, I grew up in San Diego, California. As a young person, I grew up without my father, and my father left my brothers and I and my mother when I was about 6 months old, and so I grew up in a single parent household, and my mom, she really did her best to guide us in the right direction. But ultimately, I was influenced heavily by the streets and, the stuff that I saw happening out in the street. And, as a young person, I was, influenced by the things that I saw. And, I ended up making a lot of bad choices. And
how old were you when you started making those bad choices, Kenyatta?
Probably about 12 or 13. I started hanging out with a crowd that was older than me. Some of my best friends were a lot older than me, and I saw them drinking and smoking weed and stuff when I was a young person. And so, I was heavily influenced by that. I started making bad choices and going down this wrong path, started skipping school, grades started to drop. Next thing you know, I started committing little petty crimes and that led to larger crimes. And then, wound up getting incarcerated later down the line.
Let me ask you, what thoughts did you have about, growing up in that background, you're a physically big guy. What thoughts did you have about going into the prison system before you went in? Was going into prison something that you were concerned about, or was it just something that you looked at as just it's part of life? What thoughts did you have about going into the prison system?
Well, I don't know if anybody wants to go to prison. Me personally, I was afraid. I didn't want to go to prison. I had committed a lot of crimes and got away with a lot of crimes. So when I finally got caught and was faced, with the reality of going to prison, I was afraid. I didn't want to spend time in prison. I didn't want to be locked up. And
you were how old then?
I was 22 years old.
Okay. That's about the same year that I went in. I went in when I was 23. But I've met a lot of guys that come from, a background of violence and so on like that. And they look at, or they've described going into the prison system as being almost something of a badge of honor, as something that would demonstrate their authenticity, or that they were really get their street credibility. You didn't see it that way.
Well, there was a piece of it that, that I could relate to that, because part of it, you make your bones, so to speak, by going to prison, but at the same time, I was still afraid. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be locked up. I didn't want to be away from my family. I knew that once I got out, it would improve my street cred, so to speak. But, being and having to go to jail, looking back, that really crazy way of thinking.
So when you walked in, what kind of mindset did you have? This is the first time you're telling us about the first time that you went into the prison system. This was not the life sentence. Tell us about this experience.
Well, when I first went into the prison system, I had been given a lot of advice by a lot of people who had been in before. And so,
Could you tell us what they told you?
Yeah. To never show any fear, to keep a stiff upper lip, never, talk to the police, never snitch, never, get involved in any kind of like gambling or anything like that on the inside. And, always carry a knife and be ready to stab somebody if you have to.
And what did they tell you with regard to what thoughts you should have about the world on the other side of the fences?
Wait, excuse me. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
What type of message did you receive about? I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, and then maybe that'll be easier. And then you just tell me whether you heard that same message. I always heard from the time that I went in, the best way to serve time is just to forget about the world outside and focus on your life inside of the pen. That's what I always heard from people. I didn't accept that guidance, but I know that it was pervasive in every prison where I was held. I was in the federal system. You were in the state of California system. Did you receive a message that was similar to that or different?
Yeah, I definitely heard similar messages. People that, wanted me to, join the prison gang and really focus on the stuff that was going in there so they could try to use me in there. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I never lost hope. I never lost sight of the light at the end of the tunnel. And I knew that
in that first sentence?
Oh, yeah. In both, actually. My first term, which we're talking about now, I mean, it was, I was young. When I went in, I was really trying to just, make it through it. So, yeah, I had to deal with the day-to-day stuff, but my mind, I never lost focus of, getting out.
Mm-hmm. And so how did you serve that time? What kind of things did you do while you were inside in that first sentence? How long did you serve and what goals did you set?
Well, I went in 1991 and I took a look around at what was going on around me, and I realized that, there were some opportunities for me to learn. And so I got my GED at the time. And shortly after that, I went through firefighter training, and I ended up going to fire camp and fighting fires for CAL FIRE and CDF. And I did that for about 3.5 years.
What was the length of your initial sentence?
It was 5 years, and I ended up doing like 3.5 off of that. They sent me to California Correctional Center up in Susanville, and that's where, I did my GED. That's where I got that, and then I ended up doing my firefighter training up there, and they sent me to some northern fire camps after that.
So you went in when you were 23, sounds like you got out when you were 27 or so?
Actually, I went in when I was 22. I got out when I was 25.
Out when you were 25. And what mindset, what thoughts did you have about how you were going to live your life when you came back to society after just concluding 3.5 or so years in state prison?
Well, I hadn't really given any thought to improving myself other than, coming up with a couple quick one-liners that I could tell people to make them think that I had changed. But deep down inside, I hadn't changed anything. I was going to get out. I was going to fall back in with the same old crowd. And I missed my homeboys. I wanted to go hang out with them. And that's exactly what I did. I got out after the time that I served on my first sentence, and I hadn't learned anything. I hadn't changed, hadn't taken responsibility for the crimes that I committed or held myself accountable in any way, and fell back in with the same crowd.
And how long were you free?
I was only free for about 5 months. And
5 months. Were you in a halfway house or were you at home?
No, I was at home. I was on parole, but I paroled to my grandmother's house, and shortly after that ended up getting an apartment of my own. But that only lasted for 5 months because I still had the same mindset as when I went in 1991. And, like I said, I fell back in with the same crowd, had the same kind of habits, and was going to the same kind of places and doing the same kind of things. And within 5 months, I was back in custody facing a life sentence.
Well, before we get into that, and that's going to be the essence of this interview, I want to ask you, you served time with a lot of guys. Did you find, what type of mindset did you find for most guys who were getting out of prison and going back to their same environment? What thought process did you see, did you perceive of the other guys that were serving time?
Well, the guys that I saw getting out, I didn't see anybody really doing any kind of internal work. I didn't see any real preparation. It was just all about doing push-ups and how much you could bench before you got out, trying to get as big as you could before you got out. There was really no substantial or any kind of sustainable kind of internal work being done that could help somebody change their life long term.
Yeah, that's the real sad thing. They don't pay you for doing push-ups out here. So you might be able to knock out 2,000, 2,500 push-ups in there in a day, but that's not going to get you a new car out here or get you even a dinner. But you came back out. You're out for 5 months. What happened?
Well, when I got out, like I said, I was, embraced by family and friends. But during my time, I hadn't done any work myself. And so I quickly fell back into the, drinking and partying with my friends and, not really paying attention to my future. And I hadn't really learned it I could apply once I got out. And so I really I wasn't really focused on my future. I was just living basically. I didn't have any plan for the future.
Mm-hmm. And when how did you get caught up again in the system? What happened at your arrest? And you said you were facing a life sentence. Tell us a little bit about the crime and what happened.
Well, I had a friend. I was working at the time, some little job that I had, and after work, he and I we went drinking, and then we went to a party, and then I was giving him a ride home, probably like about 2 a.m, and he had a gun in my car, and we got pulled over by the cops. And since I was on parole, they did a parole search of my car. They found the gun, and I was found to be an ex-felon in possession of a firearm. Now, this was 1994, and in July of 1994, and the 3 strikes law had only been out for a few months. So I was completely unaware that I had 2 strikes. I'd only been to jail one time, but I went in on a plea bargain, and that plea bargain stipulated 2 counts of robbery. I didn't realize that those 2 counts of robbery were 2 strikes, and that possession of a gun could get me life in prison. So when I got booked into the county jail that night, I woke up in the morning thinking that I was just, facing a violation, which is a big deal, in retrospect. But at the time, I really didn't, I didn't think about how that was going to impact my future. And, when I went to my arraignment and they told me that I was facing 25 to life, I really couldn't believe it. And, that I was, being prosecuted under the California's 3 strikes law. I was in denial about everything. And so, quite naturally, I was, in denial about that too.
And that lasted for how long? How long did this whole judicial process last before you were sucked back right into state prison?
Well, I had to go through trial. I went through trial, and it lasted for about 16 months. So I was in the county jail for about 16 months, trying to fight my case. I ultimately was convicted of being an ex-felon in possession of a firearm. The judge gave me the maximum sentence prescribed by the law, which is 25 to life. And at the time, the judges were, they were unclear about whether or not they had discretion to drop a strike in the interest of justice under 1385. But, even in my case, though, my judge had told me that even if he had the power to drop a strike, he wouldn't do it for me because he saw me being a habitual criminal, somebody who was just going to get out and commit more crimes. And so he gave me the max, basically threw the book at me and sent me off to prison.
And what type of mindset do you have when you're going into the state prison? You're a young man, not even 26, 27 years old, facing the rest of your life of imprisonment. Tell us about your mindset.
Oh, man. I mean, I can't even begin to explain how that felt. All I knew is that I was, if I had to choose a couple words, I was really confused because, there was so much uncertainty involved. With 25 to life, when you're facing a life sentence, you're faced with a lot of uncertainty about your future. You don't know what's going to happen. I mean, you could die in prison. Here I am on a bus heading to a level 4 prison, with a bunch of people who are, not just getting caught with the gun, but actually used the gun, and killed somebody. It was a daunting, I was scared. Basically, I was really scared. So, once I got up there, I was still in denial about what was going on with me. I hadn't taken responsibility for my previous crimes. And at this point, I was still blaming my homeboy for having a gun in my car, and so I wasn't in any kind of position to really think about, what my future would look like or what I could do to change my life because I was still so deep in denial about the things that I had done.
It's interesting. You just said that you were still blaming your homeboy for having the gun. And that sounds like at this stage you have a different perspective on that. Tell us a little bit about what if I understood you correctly, you no longer saw him as being the culprit, but maybe something else.
Yeah, I mean, probably about my first 5 years on that life sentence, I was, in really deep denial. But I came to a point where I realized that I was the problem. I made the choices. I allowed him to get in my car. I put myself in a position to hang out with him. So it was ultimately, I was the decision maker. I made the choices. And so I was therefore responsible. It took me a long time to get to that point, to understand what holding yourself accountable and taking responsibility for what you've done or for what I had done. It took me a long time to do that. You often hear the little saying, if you do the time, or if you do the crime, you do the time. A lot of people do the crimes, but they don't want to do the time. They want to find a loophole in the law or try to get away or get out of it. And that was my mindset for so long. So it took me a long time to get to the point where I had to own up and own my stuff, so to speak.
Well, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think a lot of the guys with whom I spoke when I was serving time, and I used to do a lot of teaching in prison, and I used to talk with guys and say, how many, I ask guys, first of all, hold up your hand, how many guys are coming back to jail? And, not a single hand would go up. Of course, statistics show that, 7 out of 10 guys in this room are coming back to jail at some point, even though we're in prison, we say we never want to come back. Then I ask questions about, well, how can you be sure you're not coming back? And they say, I said, who are your friends going to be? And a lot of guys say, look, as long as I'm not doing wrong, I can still hang out with my homies. And if they're doing something wrong, that's not my business. And it seems that your story is a perfect illustration of a guy who wasn't. I mean, if a guy just gets in your car and he has a gun and you don't know about it, it's easy to make that argument that says, I didn't do anything, I didn't know. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for the types of people you associate with and the types of friends you have. And if you have friends who are still involved in criminal activity, or if you know that they're not doing the types of things that your friends are doing right now, the friends who are in your life right now are doing, then you're vulnerable. And this is what I call really critical thinking skills. And it's really important for those of us who've served a lot of time in prison to think about the people with whom we associate, because those people can totally derail our life, even if we're not involved in crime. What thoughts do you have on that?
That is so true. My grandmother used to tell me when I was a kid, show me 5 of your best friends and I'll show you your future. I didn't believe her at the time. I really didn't even understand what the heck she was talking about. But now, looking back, I really understand that it's the environment that you put yourself in, the people that you surround yourself with, that plays a huge role in the direction and the trajectory of your life. For me, I was more interested in trying to be cool and hang out with the cool people, so to speak. And I didn't realize the impact that was going to have on my life. Today, I'm really clear on how important it is for me to surround myself with positive people and put myself in a position for success. If I want to be successful, I can't be hanging out on the corner, or at the park with the homies drinking 40s and smoking weed all day. Or hanging out with them while they do all that. And me, I'm thinking that just because I don't smoke the weed or drink the 40, that I'm going to be successful still. You have to remove yourself from that whole environment. You have to plant new seeds, and you have to move in a different direction. And so for me, taking those initial steps, ultimately in prison, that's what I had to do. I had to start, cutting ties with, my homies on the yard, and really focusing on the things that were not just going to help me get out, but the things that were going to help me stay out of prison.
So how long did it take for you in that second case before you came to that level of realization? Was it immediate when you walked in? You said, okay, I got a life sentence. I've been in 16 months. I'm just transitioning into the level 4 yard. Or did you do some time adjusting in the normal prison way? Walk us through your adjustment process.
Yeah, it was a gradual process. Like I said, it took me about 5 years because I was in such deep denial about everything that had happened to me, everything that I had done, to get myself in that position. I had to peel back the layers of the onion, so to speak, and really get to the root of the cause. And, at the root was me. And so I had to let go of the ego. I had to let go of the denial. I had to let go of the pride. I really had to, to really take a good long look at myself to get to that. And, in order to do that, I had to get help along the way. And some of that help came in the form of people just telling me off, people telling me like it is. I had a friend of mine that I used to call, I used to call home, and I used to call him, and he would accept my collect calls and everything. And, I used to get on the phone and rant and rave about, how the police did me wrong and how the DA was against me, and, how the judge was racist and all this other stuff. And all that stuff might have been true. But the reality of it is that I put myself in that position. And my homeboy saw it the whole time. And, he was one of these people that he had changed his life around, and he saw me being in denial. He just called me on it. And he's just like, man, you need to stop blaming everybody else. The judge didn't get you in jail. The DA didn't get you in jail. You got yourself in jail. And the only way that you're going to get out is if you change your life, and I started arguing with him about it. And he's like, don't even call me anymore until you get your shit together. And then he hung up on me. And at that point, I got off the phone, walking away from the phone, blaming him for being a bad friend. And when I got back to my cell, I laid on my bunk and thought about how this dude is supposed to be my homie, and he's, not siding with me. But the reality of it was he was right. It took me a while to really, accept that. And once I accepted it, though, things started to become a little clearer for me. Once I realized that I was the problem, that I made the choices and I made the decisions to get myself in a position, I realized that I was the solution. If I could make some bad choices and create some problems in my life, I could, make some better choices and create some solutions in my life. And so that's what I started doing. Slowly but surely, I started reaching out for help. And that was the beginning of the transformation for me right there.
Who did you reach out to help you?
Well, the first people that I reached out to were my family. I started talking to, my mom and other family members about what I was going through, about what I was feeling, about the things that I had done, and was really, upfront with them, and transparent with them about, how I felt and what I wanted to do to change.
And what types of changes were possible for you inside of a level 4 penitentiary?
Well, obviously, it was hard for me to just go out and be an upstanding citizen in prison. I think initially it was really all about the mindset and the way that, that I think. My mom sent me this book. When I started telling her about, me wanting to change the way that I think, she sent me this book called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And for any of you guys that are out there listening, it's one of the most powerful books I've ever read in my life. It's called As a Man Thinketh by James Allen.
And who is James Allen?
James Allen is an author. It's an old book. It's a really small book. The book is only like about 50 or 60 pages long. But the contents of the book, it really, really focuses on, how powerful your thoughts are. Basically, we are a culmination of our thoughts. And we become, what we think about most. And, the book was really, really inspirational for me. And it allowed me to recognize, how powerful my thoughts are, and, how powerful my choices are, and how they can, impact not just myself, but everyone around me.
Well, we're going to link to that book in the show notes, but I'd like you to tell us a little bit about, once you started to change your thoughts, what positive goals or achievements were you able to make when you were still facing a life sentence? You still faced the pressure of another 1,000 guys on the yard that may not have read yet As a Man Thinketh. Tell us what you were able to do.
Well, it was a process, man. I had to take it one step at a time. And, it's not something that, I woke up one day and just walked out and just, I'm a changed man. It didn't happen like that. It was gradual and it was over time. And, I slowly but surely started like cutting associations with, certain people that I hung out with on the yard. I really started focusing on my education.
Tell us about the type of people who would you cut? What type of guy? What would make you want to cut ties with somebody? What was the impetus that would say, I'm going to cut ties with this type of person? Walk us through what that type of person might be.
Well, I mean, I could see people on the prison yard still making bad choices, still hung up on the same stuff. Come out to the yard, sit down at the pinochle table or dominoes and play pinochle or dominoes or do push-ups all day. I saw and I knew that that wasn't going to help me get out of prison, and it wasn't going to help me stay out of prison. And so my mindset at that point was, to be able to get out and to stay out. And I wanted to surround myself with people who had that same mindset. And so if people didn't have that mindset, if they were content with being in prison, then so be it. That's their choice. For me, I didn't want that. I wanted to move forward with my life. And I started seeking out people that were on the yard that had that same mentality. And they were few and far in between, but I found them.
But you didn't have a way out yet. You still had a 25 to life sentence.
Right.
What were you doing in there that might position you so that when the time came, when an opportunity opened, you would be ready? Tell us about what activities you pursued.
Well, the first thing, like I said, the first thing that I did was got involved in some programs that were inside. And so I was in prison. My initial crime that I committed was an armed robbery, and then I got caught with a gun. And those are classified as like violent crimes. And so I had to, start asking questions about where my violent behavior started. I had to understand the causative factors of my crimes. And so I started seeking out help in different programs to try to understand where that came from. Because listen, I didn't come out of the womb with a pistol in my hand. I didn't come out of the womb, thinking about robbing somebody. So where did all this stuff happen with me? How did this begin? I had to go back. I had to rewind the tape and really, assess my life to figure it all out. In order to change a problem, you got to know what the problem is. And so, I had to do that work. And so I started getting involved in programs that could help me do that because I didn't know how to do it by myself. So I had to reach out for help. I had to get involved in some programs and, open myself up to people that could help me figure this out because I couldn't figure it out for myself.
Well, that's certainly the path of masterminds, whether it's Ken Allen, As a Man Thinketh, or Socrates, or Nelson Mandela, or Viktor Frankl. What they're all telling us to do is to really know thyself and do exactly what you were doing. Think back, because you didn't go to prison because of that one day being caught in a car. It may have begun when you were 12 years old and the friends you started to hang out with then. And once you realize, hey, these are the types of influences that bring nothing but a parade of horribles in our life, until we do that, we can't really start shifting focus. And I'm really so grateful to you for sharing that story here with the audience of the Earning Freedom. We're going to be speaking. We're communicating this message, Kenyatta, inside of high security penitentiaries across the United States. And we're going to have another episode in which we're going to talk about what specific goals you were able to achieve during that life sentence and how that pursuit of those goals really resulted in you not only coming back to society to a life of mediocrity, but to a life of extraordinary promise. My last, as we come to the end of this particular episode, I'd love for you to just tell these young people who are watching you right now that may be on the start of a life sentence or a 20-year sentence or a 10-year sentence. What message might you offer to those people right now so that they can position themselves for the best possible journey through prison and, of course, a return to society like you've experienced?
I would say to these people, every person that's listening to this or watching this on the inside is never give up. Never give up hope. Always remember that you have a choice. And if you can start making those choices right now, one by one, those choices can not only lead you out of prison, but they can help you stay out of prison. And, don't be afraid to ask for help. That was the number one thing. I tell people all the time, that was the number one thing that helped me when I came home, and actually when I was inside prison, is learning how to ask for help. Because, even before I set foot in any prison, I was already incarcerated by my own thoughts. So I was in prison long before I even got to prison. But my point is that, in order for you to break free from the prison and the cycle of incarceration, you have to have help because it's really hard to do it by yourself. So creating a really strong support system is something that's really important. And there are people around you that want to help, that want the same things that you do in terms of, finding and keeping and maintaining freedom. do that. Reach out to people, start asking for help, and you'll see the change.
And the last thing I'd like to add on to what Kenyatta just said is be very careful about the people with whom you're associating. One of the lessons that I get out of Kenyatta's inspiring story, and you're going to hear just how incredibly impactful it was to his return to society in the next episode. But when he said, I had to really start thinking about the people with whom I was associating. If guys were still caught up in the whole prison reputation, being a shot caller or whatever the case is in prison, that's awesome. You got to understand the costs that come with that. And that cost means that you're always going to be in this cycle of failure. So we're going to hear in the next episode about Kenyatta's amazing return to society, specifically how he did it. And we'll be back soon with another inspiring Earning Freedom podcast. Thank you.